So, Claudia Cramer from Second Nature. Claudia is an exercise nutritionist, clinical dietitian, and an accredited sports dietitian. She's broad experience, including healthcare sector, food industry, fitness industry, and the health and wellness segment. Claudia is currently practicing on UK health platform Second Nature, recently launched in Australia and New Zealand. Claudia, welcome to Pure Health Hub.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm very, very excited to get to chat to you today.
Oh, we're thrilled to have you. So Pure Health Hub is for every woman, particularly for women 40 plus, which is when we're either in the trenches or we're on the other side of the trenches, often having neglected our health and looking for answers to our health issues, but also looking to improve our well-being, or both. Often this includes sport. So I will touch on that because obviously, we're all looking for exercise. We're also looking to re-engage in activities that connect with often other women. So bearing in mind, not all women are boot camp or marathon enthusiasts. But can you share with us the importance of sports nutrition and how can improving our diet improve our sports performance?
Yeah, for sure. So some people may think, like you've mentioned, marathons. When you think sports nutrition, you might think, I have to be an elite sports person going to Olympics to start doing some tips and tricks that can help with your nutrition around sports. But it's not necessarily the case. You can just be an everyday athlete, like I'd put myself in that category, someone who enjoys exercise to get a bit better in terms of mental health and also that social aspect. So there are many things that you can do on an individual basis around sports nutrition that isn't really related to you going to the Olympics or you training for a half marathon. So in terms of some broader things you can do, it's quite a good practice to get into to be having a pre-workout snack. So often, even if you're not competing at a high level, it's still important to have something pre-workout to give you some energy so you can do that session. And when I say session, it doesn't need to be a super high intensity session, but it could be your Pilates class, it could be a dance class. I did a really good dance class recently at the gym with my mum. It was it was amazing. And so you want to feel good in the session and have enough energy to get through it. You don't want to be feeling tired or a bit run down. So making sure you're having a small snack beforehand, which might just be a carbohydrate rich food, such as a piece of fruit or some rice crackers with half a banana, something that will give you some energy, make you feel good, and so you can get through the sessions. That is an important concept in sports nutrition, even though it might not feel like it's very specific. Yeah. And then in terms of other things we can do, having your balanced main meals is a really important tip. So people might underestimate the power of having 3 balanced main meals in the day. But really, if you are, you're more than likely hitting your requirements for that post-workout time. So often we think of post-workout, we like to think of having a meal that's rich in protein and carbohydrates. So protein can be, if you're a meat eater, it can be meat. If you're more plant-based, it can be tofu, lentils, or beans. And then carbohydrates are your foods like bread, pasta, grains, vegetables, and fruit. So if you're having a balanced meal after your workout or at those 3 main meals in the day, you're more than likely doing enough to help with that sports performance as well. Because there is a massive link between how you're feeling when you're exercising and what you're eating.
Yeah. And you do talk about 3 meals a day. Is it often better for some women to have, or some people, some women, to have more frequent, smaller like meals, not even meals, but good snacks and healthy snacks and things more frequently?
Yeah. I think it definitely is dependent on yourself as an individual. So in terms of our program, Second Nature, like you mentioned, we find that most people do really well with 3 main meals, more so on a psychological level because they're not having to be thinking about food all day and grazing. So sometimes it can be easy to overdo it if you're constantly grazing. Like I know myself, if I am sitting at my computer and I have, say, muesli or a handful of nuts, it's quite easy to not think about what you're eating and just on your computer. Yeah,
That's awesome.
so I think it depends if you're someone who's quite in tune with your hunger levels. So you know when you feel physically hungry versus emotionally hungry,
Yeah.
perhaps you could be more of a snacker. But if you're someone who maybe struggles with that or struggles to distinguish between emotional and physical hunger, perhaps having those three main meals where you're sitting down, you're setting it out, you're having a nice food environment, you've got family around or friends, and you're really enjoying that meal.
Yeah. Yeah, more structured. I guess you're right. It depends on the person, doesn't it? So it's really important to
To
have
be in
that,
tune
to
with
think
to it.
about that.
Yeah. And I guess
Yeah.
that goes on the point that everything won't work for everyone. So your
Yeah.
friend down the street might be a grazer and it works for them. But if that doesn't feel right for you, you don't need to follow that.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. All right. Now, of course, the critical one is, how about mental health? How does nutrition improve our mental health? And conversely, how does poor nutrition and minimal exercise impact our health?
Yeah, so it's such a big topic and one that I really, really enjoy. So, in terms of mental health and nutrition, we have a connection between our gut and our brain. So, this is something that's been coming out in research more recently, not this year, but the last 20 years or a little bit more. And so, it's really important to have a good foundation of your gut health, which will then help your mental health. So, even things I mentioned before, having three main meals, having plenty of fruits and vegetables to give you those nutrients that can help to have a good foundation of gut health, which therefore can help your mental health. So we know that things that can help your mental health are your fruits and veggies, whole grains. They contain lots of nutrients and vitamins like B vitamins. Healthy fats, that's something that some people might think is not something you need in your diet because fat equals fat on my body, but that's not the case. So your body definitely needs fat and lots of variety of fat to help keep your brain healthy as well. And also your hormones. You mentioned that a lot of your viewers are are a bit older. So that's really important as well to help with hormones and even for young females as well. And so those things that are really good for your gut are pre and probiotics we can get from food. So prebiotics are things like spices, onions, herbs. They're my favorite ones to incorporate. And your probiotics, so they're your foods that will help to populate your gut with good gut bugs. So more of your fermented foods, yogurts, those sort of foods.
Yeah.
And you mentioned things that might not make your mental health the best. So in terms of lifestyle and food, that might be things like over-consuming alcohol, perhaps stress, being stressed out is a big lifestyle one that, it's a bit hard to keep in check all of the time, but it is one that will affect your mental health over time. And exercise. So we know that exercise releases endorphins, and that can help us to maintain a healthy, happy mind. So regular exercise has been shown to reduce anxiety, depression, and lots of mental health disorders. So it's a big picture question with lots of things we can be doing to maintain and prevent mental health disorders.
Yeah, but it is a holistic approach, right? You can't just, it all impacts your mental and physical health.
Absolutely.
So I guess I'm divulging here, but which is sort of one of the reasons I started Pure Health Hub. But I was disappointed with myself, but not shocked when I was diagnosed with type 2 diabetes last year. Always suspecting that I was a candidate because I was tested. Well, it's in my family, type 1 and type 2, but I was tested when I had our son because they thought it was quite elevated, but again, it came back negative. But I had a 12-pound baby, so it always rang alarm bells after that. And I was tested year after year with no adverse findings. And then, of course, last year, after a number of years in serious stress response, I was diagnosed with type 2. So at the risk of sounding like excuses, how much does prolonged stress, chronic pain, elevated sustained levels of stress have on your blood sugars and insulin levels?
Yeah, so there is a link. There isn't enough evidence to say that being chronically stressed will cause type 2 diabetes or those sort of things. It's quite the evidence isn't strong enough to say that. However, as I'm sure you're aware, there are two types of systems in the body in terms of our nervous system. So we have the parasympathetic, which is your rest and digest, and everything's good, everything's calm. Then you've got your sympathetic, so that's the fight or flight. And so when we're chronically stressed, that fight or flight one is just going off all the time. And that can have an impact on how our glucose is used in the body, so how our carbohydrates are used. And that can cause them to elevate. It can keep them high, which when we are type 2 diabetic or we've got insulin resistance, that's not a great thing to have happen. We want things that can help to reduce our blood glucose and to have it in line and in check. So yeah, there is a link between being chronically stressed and glucose being high, but it's not strong enough to suggest that it's going to cause certain diseases. But it's definitely something to look at with working on stress management.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, it comes down to hormones and, all of these things that operate in an elevated state. And I think for me, it's important to not just share my, there's no fun sharing your own condition, but I think it's important because I was never told that I was ever pre-diabetes or insulin resistant. I thought I may have been insulin resistant when a personal trainer some years ago had said it to me, and I had all the, rounded, belly and all that sort of stuff. But at no point, despite the constant testing, was I ever advised that I might have been pre-diabetic. It was just like, yeah, no, you're all right, off you go. And since learning, because I'm educating myself on diabetes and how best to handle it, and they're saying to me that those tests are often not even effective. Like, it depends on the time of the day. So I guess that was just pointless. So I think my point for this is making sure that women are not just taking these things for granted and someone saying, oh, yeah, you're sitting all right. You need to understand where you are on that scale, right?
Yeah, definitely. And like you've mentioned, let's say you're someone who, the pricking of the finger to get the blood glucose, that gives you a snapshot right then and there. So you could be in a certain range or you could be out of the range. That's important to be working with a professional. Even in, like you mentioned, if you're feeling those symptoms, often we might feel some symptoms or just know something's not right or have that inkling. It's best to get it checked up. And there are other things you can do, other tests, more long-term testing of how your blood glucose is being utilized in the body rather than that snapshot test, like let's say that finger prick. So like you mentioned, it's important to be thinking about these things or to talk with a health professional, because I find a lot of people who do our program, they're a little bit scared and shocked because they've just been diagnosed and they didn't see it coming and they don't know what to do. So I think being a little bit ahead, even though it's hard, just trying to think, are things moving in the right direction, or am I feeling a little bit not well in these sort of symptoms? And I think it's very powerful that you're using your own story. So continue to do so.
Yeah, well, I've never been one to share, but I'm so, I just feel it's so important that we often get overlooked and things are taken for granted. And I think it's really important to share all of this so that other women are aware. So how much of your physical health is impacted by your emotional state? I guess we've sort of touched a little bit, but or is it just a symptom of, a question of diet and exercise? And again, we come back to the stress and anxiety. They all come together, do they? I mean, is that really, And how important is it to keep that stress and anxiety at bay?
Yeah, it's very important on a few levels. So I guess physical health being affected by emotional state, it might be more in the areas of, if you've got a poor emotional state, you might not have the motivation to exercise. So therefore you're not exercising, even though we know it's very good for mental health. So having a poor or lowered mental state, let's say you're experiencing some anxiety or depression, you're probably not going to be doing those things that we know are indicative of positive health behaviors. So you're probably not going to the grocery store to prepare some home cooked foods. You're probably less likely to motivate yourself to go out and exercise. So it is a bit of a chicken and the egg situation, because nutrition and diet can influence your mental health. But then if you've got a poor mental health or lowered, you're not going to want to do the rest. So it's a cycle. Once you start making those positive changes, even if the motivation isn't there, I promise you it does get easier.
Yeah. I mean, I have been one to exercise forever, and doesn't mean I go dancing to the Pilates studio or anything, but I always know that, as long as I get there, if I can get there, then the rest sort of works itself out. So
yeah, absolutely.
or you find a mate to go along with.
Yeah.
So getting down to basics, there's so much talk about grains and carbs and reducing these and increasing protein, whether it's animal protein or conversely a plant diet. In your view, where do these sit in a healthy dietary balance, and where are these grains detrimental to our health?
So there's a lot of misinformation, and a lot of, I see it now even as a dietitian, I'll see someone's book about don't eat X food, and it'll be very specific. And in my mind, and a lot of practitioners I know, it's not so much the food itself, it's thinking, well, what does that do in the matrix of food, like the food matrix? Do you need that in terms of a healthy diet? Is it that one food that's bad in particular? So to give you the short answer, I think grains are part of a healthy diet. I think it's important to be thinking about the balance of foods. So we do go a lot into our Second Nature program and the education part of it, but building a healthy, balanced diet is one very important key because it can help with all those things we've spoken about. So having a source of protein at your main meals to help with keeping you full. It also has lots of positive benefits to your mental health as well, due to some production of different neurotransmitters. Also having a good portion of your vegetables. That's a basic one that we can probably all agree on, but there's just so many benefits from having a diet based on plant-based food as well. All your nutrients, keeps you full, super fibrous, water-based. So yeah, it keeps you full again. If that's if you're more prone to, say, emotional eating, you might not be eating enough of the good stuff. Then having a portion of complex carbohydrates. So that's where your grains would fit in. So that's things like rice, bread, pasta, amaranth, quinoa, all those grains we talked about. It's still important to have, but perhaps at a smaller percentage or portion of your plate than what you're used to. So we aim to have a few serves of these complex carbs per day, and that might look like around a quarter of your plate. So if we think about the traditional Western diet, some meals might be very, very carbohydrate rich, so heavy in those grains, and that might not be the best balance. It's not to say that that food is bad, but we've got to think about the whole balance of food as well.
Exactly. And, obviously the carbs, as the consumption of carbs has virtually taken a tumble for me. And that's totally fine. But of course I do, have whole grains at times, but I tend to do it at different times of the day. Does that help? Is it better to have, not just for me, but anybody in this kind of age range or potentially pre-diabetes? Is there a better time of the day to consume these things?
So I like to think about it more in terms of the whole day. So try and think less about the timing, because sometimes it can be quite stressful to think about, am I doing this right, this right, this right, this right? And you feel like you're just checking things off, and then you're often not listening to your body. I know I've done that in the past at times, and I've got to tell myself, hang on, just take the pressure off, go back to basics and do what you know or what you feel is right for your body. So some people might not like to have a heavy carbohydrate-rich dinner. Perhaps it doesn't sit well before they go to bed. For others, say you've exercised in the evening, perhaps you need that carbohydrate to help with your recovering muscles. So I would typically recommend spreading it out across the day and seeing how you feel. If you prefer to go to bed feeling a bit fuller in terms of having those grains, or you've exercised, or whatever that meal may be, perhaps you might have one pre-dinner. But for me in the morning, I like to have a piece of toast. So I'll have that in the morning because that's something that I enjoy. So yeah, it really is down to what you do enjoy and also what's sustainable.
Yeah. And listening to your own body again, right? I mean,
Yeah.
what it constantly comes down to. So tell me, from where you sit, what are some of the challenges that women are talking to you about when it comes to achieving their dietary goals?
Yeah, so that's a very big question. I guess from my perspective and my experience, a lot of women struggle with commitments. So they may be running the household. It's not to say that men don't help or men don't do more than the women, but from my experience, a lot of women are doing a lot in the household, plus working, plus raising kids, plus working on their own health. So often I find some women have competing priorities. They might say, look, I'm really interested in prioritizing my health because of XYZ, but I've also got all of these commitments. So what can I do? Like, things can't really be taken out of my day. You know, you can't not drop your kids to school, or you can't not make kids lunches. So yeah, often in these cases, I try and work with the client on what isn't a priority. So there might be something in there. It's a very case by case basis, but what could you do? Is there room in the day to add in things that you enjoy or that you'd like to do for yourself? For example, some people might go for a walk at lunchtime instead of sitting down. So what can you do in an already busy day, but to still make sure you're filling your own cup up?
Exactly.
Yeah.
You know, and it's one of the most vital things that you could do in the day, and yet it is neglected often. So it is that, you know, focusing, being able to help women kind of drill it down, isn't it? Again, it's not even necessarily nutrition, it's how we're going to fit this in.
Yeah. And I think a lot of people that we coach in the program, they're very knowledgeable. They understand what to do. It's more so troubleshooting, how can we do it? So how can we fit it all in the day?
Yeah, absolutely, because we're feeling overwhelmed. Now, I noticed another big question really is about gluten. So I noticed some women seem to avoid gluten in the belief that perhaps reduces carbs, or there seems to be just a little bit of, what am I trying to say? The anomalies, the gluten concerns perhaps are unwarranted or warranted. I'm not sure.
Yeah, so gluten's a big one, and it's not so much, it's interesting looking over the years of trends that happen. So you might be aware, many years ago, there was a trend on people stop eating fat, like the anti-fat movement. And now it's shifting a little bit. And then you have the people right at the other end saying, don't eat any carbs and go keto. So sometimes these aren't warranted. Gluten is potentially one of them. So gluten is in whole wheat products, and it's the compound that makes the food like very stringy. You know, when you have a nice slice of bread, it's that springy. Yeah, it's delicious. Why would you want to cut it out? So yeah, so in terms of cutting out gluten to reduce carbs, I don't see as a great answer, because often the products, let's say you're replacing that with a gluten-free product, often it has different, or it's fortified with different ingredients. So it's not as natural, it's more processed than the product that would contain gluten. And often some people see it as a health halo. So we might see, oh, it's gluten-free, I can eat it, plus I can eat many other things. And it might be laden with sugar, it could be a processed product, but often people miss that and just see the health halo of the gluten-free product. So yeah, we don't need to take it out to be healthy. There's a lot of other things we can do without just picking on gluten specifically. I think if you're someone who's celiac, so that's obviously a problem for you, that needs to come out and be dealt with a health professional. But in terms of, do you need to take it out to have a healthy, balanced lifestyle? The answer is no.
No, exactly. Except, of course, for celiacs.
Those in medical, yeah. If you've got a medical reason, then that's up to you.
It's almost like having to be dairy free, because that doesn't sit with you or whatever.
Absolutely.
So important to me, I think, is what are the superfoods that menopausal women really must include in their diet, because we know that, you know, and some women don't want to take HRT or whatever it is, but there is a deterioration in our, you know, our joints and bones and you know, even brain function to a certain extent. What are some of the things that can really help us get through this and improve to come out the other side a little bit more healthy and connected?
Yeah, so a lot of the things I've talked about, having healthy sources of protein in the day. So a lot of that we recommend with menopausal women is the healthy fats. So your salmon, tuna, other really oily fish that is high in omega-3. So omega-3 is important for brain health as well as hormones. And we find that some people say, for example, you've cut out all fat. So where are you getting that healthy, beautiful food to nourish your hormones? So it's less about what do you need to cut out and more about what can you get in and really help to nourish your diet. So lots of, we mentioned whole grains, vegetables, fruits, nuts, seeds, Variety is key as well. So we know lots of food is full of different vitamins and nutrients. So that can be a really big one as well, rather than being restrictive. So what's some things that you can incorporate that you enjoy, and that also increases the variety of your food? What other things? I guess superfoods is still a health halo in terms of, you may think because it's superfood, you have to only eat that. But for example, berries, they're a great one. That's superfood. I'd incorporate also some dark chocolate when you can. Not a bad one.
I don't think you'll get anybody saying no to that.
Yeah. And another group of foods that I recommend in this population is the cruciferous vegetables. So they're very powerful in being, I guess, helping to take away any excess estrogen. So those are your cabbage, Brussels sprouts, those foods, broccoli, like those very cruciferous vegetables. So that might be one that you could incorporate if you don't already. I use those vegetables in a stir fry. So I'll add onion, garlic, ginger, cumin, cabbage, and I'll really saute it up, and I'll use it as a base for other meals. Like I'll add it with tofu and then really jazz it up on top. So yeah, there's a few tips and tricks you can do to help with those conditions.
Yeah. Beautiful, because it also impacts brain health too, right? So it's not just, the physical element, of course. We've got to keep this brain ticking over as well.
We do.
All right, now just a little bit about Second Nature. What can you tell me about it? What is it, and what's your primary focus, and how can it help women of this generation?
Yeah, absolutely. So I've mentioned before, we have many women on the platform, which I love to coach on a day-by-day basis. But Second Nature is, in my words, a one-stop shop for lifestyle change. So it's really a place where you can educate yourself around nutrition and lots about holistic health. So sleep, exercise, mindset, emotional eating. It's an app. So it's right in your pocket. You've got a dietitian with you. So it could be me if you're in Australia or New Zealand. And so you can have that interaction with a group. You've got group support. We have a big recipe team who have amazing recipes. So you don't feel like you're, restricting, or you're not doing anything that isn't nourishing your body. And we don't, a lot of people in the program do it for weight loss. We have a lot of pre-diabetic people, diabetes, type 2 diabetes. So it can be helpful in remission of these conditions, having a healthy diet and lifestyle. But some people do it just to feel good, to lose weight, to be more confident in the kitchen, and for many reasons. So yeah, we help to support that.
Yeah, I mean, the inspiration often, I've sort of gotten to this point. I've always loved cooking, and I've always loved colourful food and all of that. But sometimes when you've been doing it for so long, it's like, well, I need some more inspiration. And even that alone is helpful,
Yeah, absolutely. And I often find that I'm learning things on a day-by-day basis from our members on the platform. So I'll learn tips and tricks, and I'll learn different food combinations. So it really is a community of people who are all on the same goal of trying to be happier and healthier.
Oh, brilliant. Well, that sounds like something we could all do with. Claudia, that's been great to chat to you today. Thank you so much for doing so. And hopefully we'll get to chat to you again soon.
Absolutely. Thank you. It's been very fun.